Welcome back to the show, everybody. I'm Gina.
And I'm Evo.
Happy Friday, everybody.
Happy Friday.
I want to cheers like ASAP.
Let's go. Right into it.
Waste no time today.
And so for those of you that are joining us either by listening or watching, we are drinking a Sauvignon Blanc.
Yes, which we highly recommend. It is from New Zealand. I'm favoring the New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs. I ain't gonna tell you the name because they ain't dropping us no coins. So until that happens, I ain't dropping no more names. But talking about dropping names, let's talk about the name that everybody's talking about right now, which is Euphoria. And if you're not if you haven't heard about Euphoria or you're not watching Euphoria, I'm surprised at this point because I just feel like it is so saturated on social media.
It is.
And right now there's a little bit of controversy behind it. And we love to talk about the controversy. And the controversy that is surrounding it is that the organization D.A.R.E, which, goes into schools and teaches young kids and teenagers about, the dangers of drugs and so on and so forth. And it was really big when you and I were growing up, just the Just Say No campaign. Mm-hmm. Remember that? That was spearheaded by Nancy Reagan. So D.A.R.E came out with a statement that I actually want to read so that you can understand, what is their stance on how they feel about what Euphoria is doing in displaying the drug use. So D.A.R.E said, and by the way, they released a statement to TMZ, which I thought was hella funny. like not NBC, not CNN, TMZ, but okay.
But you know what though? TMZ is like a legit reputable source of news now.
I guess.
Right, well.
But I'm going to read their statement. So it reads, rather than further each parent's desire to keep their children safe from the potentially horrific consequences of drug abuse and other high-risk behavior, HBO's television drama Euphoria chooses to misguidedly glorify and erroneously depict high school students' drug use, addiction, anonymous sex, violence, and other destructive behaviors as common and widespread in today's world. D.A.R.E also said that it would like to consult with the representatives of the show to present its concerns.
My concern is who the hell wrote that article? That's what I'm concerned about.
You mean the statement?
The statement, yes, because I just feel like that they're a little out of touch of, what the show really represents and what it shows. I don't know. I don't feel that way at all.
I would firmly agree with you that I also don't feel that way about the show, but I think you and I have a very different perspective when it comes to what we're seeing on screen when we're watching Euphoria, especially when it comes to the drug use that is surrounding, which is the lead actress Zendaya, which plays Rue.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that the first season was actually hard for me to watch, and I actually went back and watched a couple of episodes just to kind of refresh my memory, just to kind of really wrap my head around Rue's journey of her drug addiction and her drug use. And man, I was in tears again. And I think I've watched the first season, I want to say this is probably my third or fourth time watching it because it was just so impactful for me. So I definitely don't agree with what they're saying based on my own personal experience.
Yeah. Funny thing is, I don't, at the beginning, I wasn't really a fan of the show. Mm-hmm. When I first watched it, I felt that it didn't do an accurate representation of what it is to use drugs and things like that as an ex-drug user. But I was wrong because I ended up giving the show a second chance, mm-hmm. and then quickly realized that they're actually really on point about, the way that Rue, how her life plays out and how she, she's on drugs and things like that. And I immediately got hooked on the show. And then now in this second season, this last episode, I mean, wow, I was blown away by her performance.
Yeah.
So totally 180 degrees changed my view on the show. And I think that they've done an amazing job.
So let me ask you, what about the show in the beginning did you feel like wasn't authentic about the drug use?
So, you know, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it gave me all right. So remember when we were watching Breaking Bad?
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt that in the beginning of Breaking Bad, it did the same thing to me, where I just felt that the storyline about where they were when the drugs took place and how the scenes played out and things like that, I just felt like that they were over dramatized. And I felt like there was like a sense of realism that was missing out of it. I felt like they was making it kind of like cinematic in Hollywood per se. But then the story kicked in, and then that's when I really like got submersed in the show. Same thing went for Euphoria. You know, once I started to learn about Bruce's story and I started watching a couple episodes, and I learned about the stories of her peers in school and things like that, that's when it really like started to sink in for me. I got hooked on the story. But then also there all of the events that followed, as far as, you know, in Rue's story, from when she got originally hooked on drugs and then she overdosed, you know, and then she had to go to, you know, NA, and the way that affected her family, all of those events, those felt very real. Those are real stories. And so that's when it kind of like changed for me.
So you feel like in the beginning of Euphoria, the way that the way that the show was portrayed, as far as like the drug use, felt like you felt that it was glamorized somewhat.
Yeah, a little bit.
There was like, it lacked a sense of realism.
Yeah, I just sometimes, because you know what?
That's so interesting.
Well, I mean, listen, I've been in some pretty like, you know, hardcore scenes.
So have I.
So, you know, for me, it's so, there's always I always have like this bias when I'm watching these actors and actresses play these roles, that they're lacking the actual real experience, and that they're just acting, and that there's a part of them that doesn't really know how real it is. And not to say that goes for all actors and actresses, because I've seen some amazing performances by, you know, some amazing actors and actresses that have blown me away. But I've also seen some that are really crappy and they just don't hit the mark, and I can't watch it, you know, because of the lack of authenticity that they need to bring in order to convince me that, you know, that what I'm watching is real, or at least, you know, it appears to be real. And so it took a minute for Zendaya to convince me.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah.
I guess the reason why I'm so surprised is because when I first started watching Euphoria, from the first episode, I felt there was such a sense of realism to it. But I guess looking at it from your perspective, you and I had very different experiences when it came to drug use, especially in our younger years. So I could see maybe how like you felt like it didn't have that sense of authenticity for you, but for me it did. And you and I were talking about this earlier today, and I said to you that I remember one of the first times that I did a hallucinogenic was in high school, and it was given to me by a friend, and it was just very like matter of fact. My friend came up to me and was just literally like, "Hey, you want to do this acid?" And I was like, "Bet, let's go." Like, no questions asked. And it reminded me of the scene in the first episode with Rue, where she goes to meet Fezco and cop some drugs, and she's talking to Ashtray, and she says, you know, let me get whatever, and then he's like, yo, you want to try something new? And she's like, what is it? He's like, you know, explaining it. It's basically some sort of hallucinogenic. And she's like, whatever, just give it to me. And I could see how there are many people that have never stepped in that like aspect of a world of drugs that would look at that and be like, what? Like, it doesn't go down like that. No, it literally goes down like that.
You know what though? At the beginning, like, it was hard for me to accept Zendaya in this role.
Okay.
Because of the roles that I've seen her play before. It was nothing like, I've never seen her play anything like this. So like immediately when I saw her in the show, I'm like, is she gonna be able to pull this off? Like, you know, I was second guessing her abilities from the beginning. Like, you know, she had the chip stacked against her with me because of the other roles I've seen her in. I just never thought that this would be something that not only would she go for, but she would body.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was so blown away by the way that she was able to perform and be so and with such conviction that, and I'm a super fan now.
Yeah. I don't know if you remember me saying, like, before season 1 even ended, I was like, she's gonna get an Emmy.
Yeah, you did.
She's gonna get a Golden Globe. Like, I was not playing around. I could tell by her performance level that is what was the path for Zendaya, and I think it's gonna happen again for her. But let's get back to the glamorization of the drug use in the show, because that is where this organization D.A.R.E really has a problem.
They feel like that they're glorifying
Yes.
the drug usage and the whole party scene and everything that goes on in the show.
Yeah. So I could see how D.A.R.E would look at this and think that there are some young... I would hope that there are kids not under the age of 14 watching the show, to be honest. I really don't think... To me, 14 is even maybe kind of young, but I mean, the first time I did drugs, I think I was like 12 or 13. So I would say no younger than 14. I don't think that this type of show should be consumed. The story is very adult, and I feel like it takes an adult mind to really wrap your head around what you're seeing. So I could understand how D.A.R.E would look at it like, I hope that there's not young people watching this and thinking that this is cool, or that this is the way that teenagers function when they get to high school. They go to parties and there's this like array of drugs and all this type of shit. But what I will tell you is that in one of the first episodes where they're at that house party and there's drugs and there's alcohol, I don't know about you, but I've gone to house parties when I was in my high school years, and that's exactly how it went down. I wouldn't say that there was pills floating around, because when you and I grew up, that wasn't really like what a lot of people were partaking in back in the 90s.
Not at those type of parties. Like those type of things were happening more in like a smaller concentrated group of people having like a small personal party. But like a big old house party, it was a lot, just mainly just, weed and alcohol. And that was about the gist of it.
Really?
At the big parties like that, like they have on the show, yeah, that was mainly what was going on. I mean, it wasn't until like, as far as high school goes, it wasn't until like I was older, out of high school, that I would attend a party that size and there would be other things going on, but not while I was in high school.
Well, I definitely do think the comparison between our generation and this current generation that they're depicting in the show Euphoria is vastly different.
Yeah, of course.
The access to drugs is very different, and the type of drugs that like to be consumed are very different.
I'm sure there are.
When it comes to the drugs and the usage being glorified, I personally feel like it's the polar opposite. When I watch Euphoria, I look at it like, shit, this is so raw. The way that we are watching Rue go down this path of basically annihilating herself when it comes to drug uses. And it starts off very innocent. She is caretaking for her sick father that is dying from cancer. And, she has a conversation with him, and she basically says something to the effect of like, what does this drug feel like? And he's like, oh man, that's the worst. And, if anybody knows anything about someone who is deathly ill with something like cancer, they're taking an array of drugs that basically are just keeping them comfortable.
Yeah.
If it's an illness that can't be cured. So she takes this oxy for the first time, and the father doesn't even know anything the wiser. And that's really like the gateway for her into the drug use. So then you watch this journey of her going from this like innocent usage, even though young in her childhood, Zendaya was diagnosed with several disorders. She was diagnosed with OCD. She was diagnosed with back then what would have been considered ADD. She was also diagnosed with like anxiety disorder, and potentially they thought she could have been bipolar. So from age like 5 until like 12, she was being given all types of medication. And I don't know if you have any experience with this type of medication, but my little brother, when he was young, he was born a lot later than Zendaya was born in the show. But I feel like he was in the school system around the time where there was that height of like kids being diagnosed as ADD, ADHD, and my little brother was prescribed Ritalin. And when I tell you he became a different person on these drugs,
Yeah.
I watched my brother basically go from this like energetic, lively, to what I would say he almost was kind of like zombie-like.
And that was because he was diagnosed like hyperactive.
I would say that it was more like attention deficit. It wasn't hyper. So that's ADHD. He was ADD. So attention deficit disorder. He was not able to focus and had symptoms of, fidgety, but not necessarily hyper. I just felt that my brother was more lively, and once he got on Ritalin, he literally would come home from school and it was just, he was like a zombie. Like,
That's funny because Ritalin is supposed to like make you focus.
It did, but it took away his personality. It made him focus. Yeah, he was able to stare at the board and stare at a book, but everything else was like almost non-existent. And luckily he wasn't on that for a long time. So I do haven't experienced it. So what I'm trying to say is that Rue was already familiar with taking drugs. She was already familiar with, like, she was very comfortable popping a pill, and there wasn't a lot of
foreign to her.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of fear behind it.
Right.
Whereas someone that has never seen something like that or felt like the alteration of their mind and potentially would steer away from it.
Yeah, almost like she was like almost like curious, like I wonder how this will make me feel.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. So when D.A.R.E is going to say that it's glorified, that's why it's so hard for me to agree with that statement. I could understand their fear of kids looking at it like, oh, this is potentially cool, but if they watch Rue's journey from the beginning, it is deep rooted in pain and depression and loss, and it's just so heart-wrenching why she's doing these drugs. I don't feel like there's anything glamorous about that at all.
No, they're definitely not glorifying anything. I mean, I think that the show does an amazing job on showing people what a parent's worst nightmare is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This young girl is spending time with her dying father on his deathbed and ends up trying morphine, pharmaceutical grade morphine. Oxycontin.
You mean, are you talking about in season 1 or currently?
No, Oxycontin is morphine.
Okay.
Yeah. So she ends up trying, pharmaceutical morphine and takes a liking to it. Yeah. Probably like the last thing that her mother thought would be the way that her daughter would get addicted to drugs is the way that it happened. It's the ones that you don't see coming that hurt the most. And I think that I love the way that they displayed that. It's like it's snuck in through an angle of their lives that nobody ever would have suspected, and it wreaked havoc. There is no, in my point of view, there's no glorification of it at all. It literally shows this girl's life fall apart into pieces and her destroy her life and the people around her that love her the most without even thinking twice about it. She goes full on addict mode throughout everything is just a wreck. I don't see the glorification in it. I don't agree. I think it's very educational and it's very eye-opening for people that think that it is a glorious thing, and that it is like, drugs are cool and, and for whatever images that there may be out there that depict it in that type of way where it is glorifying, this is not it.
That is so interesting that you bring that up, because when I thought about it, I was like, wow, I'm so surprised that D.A.R.E thinks that this type of drug uses that is being displayed on Euphoria is glorified. Because when I think about drugs being glorified, I think about it in music. And one of the prime examples that immediately popped in my head was Scissorb. I can't tell you how many times I've heard a song where the artists were walking around with a cup in their hand that was filled with, maybe they didn't show what was in the cup, but it was
It was a double styrofoam cup.
Yeah.
Like, what else is that?
Yeah. And if anyone doesn't know what Scissorb is, it is it is Sprite mixed with codeine, sorry. And that is meant to fuck you up. And there was a song that came out that basically was like, sizzling on some scissor, sit. Like, to me, that is glorification of a drug.
They used to call it lean because it would make you lean. And this drink became popular in rap videos. I mean, it was being glorified.
So to me, when I think about something being glorified, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
That to me is the ideal depiction of something being glorified. To go even a little bit further, I personally, we have a visitor.
What's up, buddy?
I personally can tell you firsthand, I had a recent conversation with 2 ex-blood gang members. And this conversation was really shocking to me. Because I think I've heard this statement before, these kids and their music. But when you're speaking to ex-gang members, you say to yourself, okay, they have what they're saying to me holds so much truth because it's coming from their own personal experience. I was lucky enough to be part of a documentary that, and I myself wasn't a part of it. I was working on it, where we were interviewing people on different ways of tackling gun violence in inner city communities. So these 2 gentlemen worked for an organization that was doing research in their own communities. This is why they were ex-gang members. They were basically reformed. But since they had the trust of their communities, they were able to go in and perform interviews and speak to the youth in those neighborhoods to try to gain an understanding of why there was this type of violence going on. And when I tell you that they literally said to me, a lot of these kids are hearing this shit glorified in the music, and they are fucking turning up because they hear, someone singing a song, I gangbang this way, I do drugs this way, so this is where it got me to where I am in my life as far as like the music, like I gangbang, but look at me, I'm a rapper. And I was so surprised to hear that because in my mind I'm like, I grew up in the hood. In my mind I'm like, yeah, I get it, those are stories, but at the same time there's a sense of it's being glamorized.
Listen, I hear what you're saying, and honestly, it just sounds like the people out there don't have anything better to do.
You think so?
They don't have anything better to do. Because in all honesty, right? So if they were to really attack like a part of our society that is glorifying this, I mean, that is one right there. I mean, it's just clear as day. It literally is being glorified. It's being sold. It's being profited off of, and people, young kids, are being influenced, and they're leading these type of lives, which are then getting them into trouble and landing them in jail. I mean, it's a big problem.
Yeah.
But you don't see them going after that, right? Why? Because it's big money. It's big record labels, and then there's this whole theory of that, allegedly that the big record labels that they're invested in the prison systems, and so that they hire certain rappers and they give them the key, the gateway to success. And they basically sign up these rappers and artists. They sign a deal with the label, the devil, and they have to promote this type of music. Why? To influence urban neighborhoods and kids who are easily influenced to live these type of lives, so that they can get in trouble, get locked up, and fill the prison systems. So, do you think it's a coincidence that D.A.R.E is not coming after them? D.A.R.E's not saying nothing, but HBO, on the other hand, they're a network. It's an easy target, I think. And you haven't heard D.A.R.E doing much lately about anything. I know I haven't. Maybe I'm wrong. I just haven't heard anything about them. So it just kind of seems like they just need to do something, and they're coming after the show.
Well, I think you and I were talking, and you said something that I was kind of struck by it. And you had said that you felt like whoever is like spearheading this campaign towards Euphoria from D.A.R.E, they lack experience in the world of drug
It seems that way.
usage.
Yeah, it seems that way, that they either lack experience in drug usage, or they don't have any family members that they've had to deal with that have had drug problems. Because if they did, I would think that they would see the show for what it really is. And the show is so much more than that too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Okay, granted, there is I feel like a tiny part of the show where they did kind of glorify drug usage at a party, and they made it seem like, they were having fun doing it. But I mean, if you take the whole show in its entirety, that's probably like 1.5% of the show.
I would agree.
All right. What the show does is it literally peels back the curtain on people making some of the worst choices of their lives, and what those choices look like and how they play out. And they really allow you to see and learn off of these things so that you don't make these mistakes themselves. I mean, you have the father, right? Do you remember his name?
Are you talking about Nate's dad?
Yeah, Nate's dad, right?
Cal?
Cal. So Cal, he's a very prominent figure in his neighborhood, in his community, and he is a homosexual. And he's been that way from before he got married, and it's been a secret, and he lives a secret double life. And it shows all of how that life and all of those decisions that he makes in that double life, how they end up tearing apart his marriage, and how those decisions end up wrecking, his life that he built. The son Nate, he's a little bit, cuckoo, I guess you would call it, and he makes a bunch of wrong decisions, and it shows how those wrong decisions play out and how they affect his life. And every character in this show makes wrong decisions, and it shows how those decisions affect their life, as kids do, as they're growing up and they're experimenting and they make wrong decisions. It's relatable. It makes almost someone feel like, I'm not crazy. I'm not, it's not just me. This is a thing. And I just think it's very educational, to say the least.
When you say that it's educational, I think that there are many people throughout the United States that would feel that it's not educational because
Yeah, of course.
they haven't even dipped their toe in anything remotely close to what is being displayed on you for. So I think in that regard, it could be looked at as, this is fully fantasy.
Right.
Like that shit doesn't happen.
Yeah. So that's why I feel that the people at D.A.R.E, they're lacking the experience.
I'm going to say that one of the things that I thought about when I think about drug usage when it comes to young adults and teenagers is that, what parent do you know that is going to openly be like, yeah, my daughter's hooked on pills? That is something that is considered so shameful. So it could be happening amongst many families within your community, that a person will have absolutely no idea that potentially could be happening to their next door neighbor or their child's best friend.
Yeah.
Or whatever the scenario may be. It could be happening so close to home and you wouldn't even know, because many families are keeping that shit on lock and they're not talking about it. So I personally look at Euphoria, like you said, it's pulling back the curtain for people to have a little bit more perspective. In addition to the perspective, I feel like it can allow for people who have no clue as to what drug addiction can look like, how horrific it can be. It will give a little bit of empathy, because I myself can say that I was guilty once upon a time as thinking that people who were addicts were weak. That was my mindset. I used to think, what is wrong with them? Why can't they just say no? Right?
Just say no.
Because I've done drugs.
And go. And
right?
Tell someone you trust.
Yeah.
You remember that? Weber. Okay.
But that's my point. I honestly felt like,
yeah. There's people that think that way.
Yeah.
They're just like, why don't you just say no?
And thank God I came to the realization that I was naive as fuck to actually think something so stupid like that. And when you watch Rue in her fucking path of destruction of drug use, you have to understand that it is not something that it's not about someone that's weak-minded.
Yeah.
They can be the strongest person that you may know. But what drugs can do to a person's mind can really take them down a deep, dark hole. And there's a scene where Rue talks about the first time that she basically was chasing what she considered 2 minutes of nothing. And she has a moment where she had consumed so much drugs where the way she expresses it on the show as she's narrating it is that she takes her last breath where all of the oxygen comes out of her lungs, where her heart slows down to a beat where it's almost unrecognizable, and her brain shuts off and she is in complete silence. I almost envision it as being like the sunken place.
Yeah.
She is gone. And the way she explains it is, once she reached that moment, it was one of the most fearful moments she's ever had. But at the same time, it was the moment that she is forever chasing. It is that moment of complete silence for her where she's not thinking about the death of her father. She's not thinking about how fucked up she's dug her life into drugs. She's not thinking about how much she doesn't want to live because how much she misses her dad. She doesn't think about how much turmoil and pain that she's inflicted on her family. None of it exists. And for a long time, I didn't understand that when an addict would chase that feeling. And from experience, I can tell you, I've done drugs and experience a euphoric feeling. This is why the show is called Euphoria, where you will then chase that. And it only happens the first time. It only happens one time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's usually the first time that you experience a drug at a level that you've never experienced before, and you go into this state. And then what winds up happening is you chase that feeling, but you're never going to get back to one. So then what happens is you do more, and you do more,
Right.
and you do more, because maybe you get an inkling of what that one time felt like. I'll never forget one of the first times I did ecstasy with you. I thought they were fucking stars in the window somewhere. And, don't you remember me telling you?
Yeah, I mean, it's...
That never happened to me ever again.
The feeling is never really ever the same as the first time.
Yeah, never.
Because you end up building somewhat of a tolerance. And so when you do it the second time, it's your receptors don't really react the way that they did the first time, and so it's not as intense or as new or as fresh. So you got to turn it up a notch. You got to turn the volume up.
Yeah.
And that's how that snowballs into that. But I feel like it's I don't know, the best way that I can describe it for somebody who hasn't done it is, I know everybody eats, and if you for a second imagine the best thing you've ever eaten in your life and how that felt for the moment, that when you tasted it, and it was the first time you tasted it. It was the first time you tasted something you never ate before, but it was the most amazing thing that you ever ate, and you remembered it for the rest of your life. That moment when you had this amazing explosion of flavor in your mouth that almost gave you goosebumps, and for that moment you were immersed in this flavor and nothing else mattered. There was nothing else that existed for that brief moment. It was a full-on concentration of what your tongue could taste, what you were smelling, the way that it was making your mouth water, maybe even gave you goosebumps, right? Food can do that to you. Now imagine that over the course, imagine stretching that moment out over the course of an hour or 3 hours and just being in that euphoric state, right? I think people who've never tried drugs like that only get a little snippet of it when they do things that make their body react in a way where it's slightly euphoric. They get little bits and moments of it, but drugs will, you turn on the manual override when it comes to that, and you really take control of it, and you can go on a ride. And I think that's why, one of the reasons why drugs are so addicting. And just to say that this, that this show is, again, glorifying it, I don't know. I think somebody missed the assignment over right there. They really did.
They didn't understand the
They
assignment.
didn't understand the assignment. Like this show. You know, I think that in a way, it's, for me, it was educational because I didn't. I wasn't really like aware or fully open to the society of transgenders. Like, there's a transgender on the show, and even more so, a transgender person being in high school and what that was like. So, and then how that person, what their life is like amongst their peers, in high school. So I was like, I think that was perfect for people who don't understand. It was I think it's perfect for parents.
This is why I said that I feel like the show will help you have a essence of empathy.
Yeah. And there was a lot of other things that that the show had that are more relatable to today's generation, and as a parent will make you understand better the generation that's growing up underneath you. It actually allows you to have a connection. It creates a bridge where so many parents can be disconnected from their kids and the way that their kids' lives are. And how many times has a parent had a conversation with their child, and their child is trying to explain to them what's going on in their life, and the parent tries to relate by saying XYZ, and the kid is just like, you don't understand.
Yeah.
This show, I feel like, in many ways bridges that. So, again, totally disagree. Not feeling it. I dare the people that dare to go get a clue.
Oh my God. I will say that I can understand where D.A.R.E may have some sort of apprehension about what's being displayed. I am a parent.
Yes.
You're a parent.
Yes.
We have children. I just think that you and we tend to not stray away from those hard conversations.
Yeah.
We've had very open conversations with our children about drugs, about the consumption of drugs, about what drugs can do to you. I personally am I'm not on the opposition of drug use of certain drugs. I personally will just say that I think you said it best. If doing drugs is something that you must take on as an adult, it's an adult thing because there are adult consequences.
Absolutely, yeah.
So until you are an adult and you can be responsible for your own consequences, then you should not be partaking on drug use. Because if you are under the age of 18 and you're partaking on drug use, then your parents are held responsible. And when your parents are held responsible for your drug use, it then is looked at like your parents didn't potentially raise you right. And I can tell you firsthand, as a parent, it sometimes has a small percentage to do with that. But man, what I tell you, it has a lot to do with the environment that the child is around. And that environment can easily just be what their peers are doing in fucking school. I can't tell you. I can tell you, actually, I experienced the most amount of drug exposure in high school. I was exposed to acid. I was exposed to weed. I was exposed to ecstasy. I was exposed to cocaine. This was in high school.
Yeah.
So I just wasn't exposed to the harder drugs, even though I had come across them, not through high school, but where I grew up. So it's kind of hard for me sometimes to look at the show and say it's not real and it's glorified, because I know firsthand that it kind of is parallel to the life that I had in high school. It's not identical, but it's very similar. So sometimes I'm just looking at the show like it's almost hard to watch. Because it hits so close to home on some of the subjects, especially season 1 with Rue overdosing. And now season 2 is definitely taking on a different life. I just would hope that when parents potentially can be naive to a situation when it comes to what their kids are doing.
Yeah. This show can definitely shed some light on that.
It can definitely shed some light on it. But in the same regard, when I say that you and I weren't shy to have these conversations with our kids, is because we learned from our parents being shy about that shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And making it seem like, oh, if you did drugs, it's the devil, but not giving you any sort of guidance. It was
Right.
just like, if you do this, you could die.
Right.
It was so stupid in the way that it was delivered, that it, to an extent, almost made someone want to do drugs.
Yeah,
So you were like, what are you even talking about?
It's the classic Adam and Eve, the forbidden fruit. You know, when you're a parent and you kind of like go about things where you forbid even the conversation, the space to talk about things that may be taboo or not allowed, or things that are not looked on. You put them in a cabinet with a lock behind a shiny glass saying do not touch, and what do you think the kids are going to do?
Yeah.
They're going to go touch it. So instead of creating that environment where you're opening curiosity, sit the curious mind in front of you, open the mind up and feed it, give it to that, and just take away the curiosity.
Yeah.
You know, I think that creates such a different dynamic. And even more so, I think that the show, especially in this last episode, really shows the extent that someone who is addicted to drugs will go to get their drugs.
Yeah.
And for those people who either have a family member or a child that they suspect is abusing drugs and they're not supporting their drug habit, this show will give you a pretty good idea of what they might be doing potentially to get their source of drugs.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's easy for a person to turn a blind eye to it, you know, out of sight, out of mind. They don't think about it. They just kind of think that there's nothing going on because they're not providing. But where there's a will, there's a way. And I think the show really, really pulls the curtain back on what's in that will and how that way is paved for somebody who really wants what they want.
When I think about the way that the drug consumption is displayed, one of the reasons that I think the show is definitely not glorifying it is because they, from the first episode, explain to you why Rue is a drug addict.
Yeah.
It's not like she was just at some party and her friend was like, hey, you want to do some fucking Molly? Hey, you want to do Oxy? Even though you did say that there are small aspects of that, because there's a scene between Maddie and Cassie where they do Molly.
And it's fun. And
it's fun and they're having a good time. And there's a scene with Rue and Jules where they do like a hallucinogenic and they're like kind of tripping. But that is after they explain to you why Rue does drugs to begin with.
Yeah.
Like why she's an addict and why she consumes drugs and how that journey started. And I can tell you that a lot of parents don't even realize, you know, like in that first episode, there's a scene where Rue goes into the kitchen. She's like, Mom, you got a tampon? She's like, yeah, in the bathroom. And Rue goes in the bathroom. And then they do this scene where they show her going into the bathroom every morning and coughing while she's opening the medicine cabinet and she's stealing her mother's Xanax.
Yeah.
You know how many times I've heard stories like that where young people are going into their parents' medicine cabinets and taking whatever the fuck they can find?
Well, I think even more importantly about that scene where Rue and Jules, they take something, they come from a party, and it's like they just met and they're getting to know each other and they're having fun together, and Rue pulls out some drugs and she does them with Jules. But I think the great part about that scene is that it shows that Jules, she's not really into that.
Yeah.
She does it and it's like, all right, whatever, it's not my thing. And her character stays true to herself and really doesn't get involved with that. Rue, she doesn't really like do much, like you don't see her doing too many drugs after that.
She does it one time after that
Yeah,
is pretty prominent.
one time I'm saying, but it's
Yes.
not it's not like part of her thing,
Correct.
right? She's more of like a straight and narrow person, you know.
Yes.
And she stays true to that, and Rue realizes that, and then Rue has to hide her addiction from Jules, you know. So it just shows so many different perspectives and so many different characters, that to say that again, and I hate to keep going back to this, that it's glorifying, it's so much more than that.
Yeah, I will say that, D.A.R.E actually had problems with other facets of the show, which are like the display of sex or sex violence, because in the first season there is a aspect of revenge sex when Kat goes to a party. She winds up having sex with a couple boys in a room. They record it. Remember, that circulates through the school.
Yeah. But this is a real thing that happens.
Hello. You and I were actually just talking about this.
Yeah.
Well, actually, we didn't talk about it last episode, but basically you had said to me, we were talking about bullying, and I said to you, I said, I feel like it's worse in this generation, because once they leave school, it doesn't fucking stop. Because you get some footage of somebody, that shit is circulating the whole school. People are talking about it during school, after school, before school, because it's on social media. It's going through people's cell phones. So to me, that is very real. We have sons that can speak directly to that. And sadly, I have experienced some younger people, because I work in an industry where I'm exposed to a lot of younger people, and when I say younger, I mean like, maybe early 20s, mid 20s, where they've openly expressed to me their habits and the things that they're doing and the drugs that they're consuming. And I'm sometimes surprised, because I would consider these drugs dangerous because of their level of the level that they're easily addicted to. And a lot of the times they're pills. And to the fact that in Euphoria, it's shedding a light how a lot of these pills are found in the home. They're found in a parent's medicine cabinet, or a kid, goes into the hospital and breaks a leg and
gets a prescription.
You and I can speak firsthand to this, Evo.
Yep.
After we had our daughter back in 2014, I had cesarean, and I was prescribed Percocets. And I remember being very fearful of them, because one time, a couple years prior, I had a procedure where I was prescribed Percocets, and I wind up getting sick from it. So when my doctor this time prescribed, I was like, no, I don't want to do this. And she was very adamant about me taking it, because she said to me the level of pain that I was experiencing was probably very different from the very small procedure that I had before. And, I trusted my doctor, and I took her. She was right. Because I felt very different on it this time. I took them, for about 2 weeks.
As prescribed.
At the end of the 2 weeks, I was just like, okay, I'm done. I don't want this anymore. I feel fine. Because what I started to notice was I was supposed to be taking one every 6 hours or one every 8 hours. And I started to notice that towards the end of the 8 hours, I was fine. I started to notice that I didn't need it as much. So I basically just turned to you and was like, okay, I'm done with these. And I maybe had 5 or 6 pills left or something like that. And I went to sleep one night, and I started basically having what would be considered convulsions in my sleep.
You're having withdrawals.
Yeah, I was having, and I had no idea what the fuck was happening to me. And you called the doctor, and the doctor was like, you explained to the doctor what was happening. The doctor was like, you have to wean her off of this. And when I tell you, I was fucking shocked that this is what I had to go through. My body literally was like, you cannot be at ease without this. You had to take the pills from me, and you had to, every night you gave me, first it was a half, 2 nights you did a half, and then one other night you did a quarter, until all however many pills I had left were done, and my body was just tapered off from it. I was fucking mind blown by that shit. So to know that that's how easy it can happen, that was one of the stepping stones for me to understand that it's not about being a weak mind, because I consider myself strong as fuck. And when I tell you, my body immediately was like, You need that.
It was your mind was not in control.
I had zero control.
No.
Zero control. So when I watch Euphoria and I watch Rue go through this shit, I understand. And they had those 2 episodes during season 1 and season 2 where it was like it went into Rue's story, and Rue talks about she does not want to live anymore. Yeah. She's on this journey, but at the same time I feel like Rue's conflicted because she says she doesn't want to live anymore, but then you go into episode 1 of season 2 and she finds herself in the room with this new character, Elliot, and she feels like she's going into cardiac arrest. She asks Elliot to give her something else to like counteract what she's going through.
Right.
At that point, if she was looking to die, if she was looking to not live anymore,
she was allowed to talk.
However, I think Rue wants to die in a way potentially where she's unknowing of it. She wants to die in that space that she talks about her chasing. She wants to die in that space where she is turned off, where she doesn't even know where she is. And again, I can speak to that directly. I have from experience gotten high to a point where I did not know where I was, but I know that I was somewhere, but it was completely it was an illusion. I was hallucinating to a point where I was receiving so much serotonin or so much dopamine, because it was a mixture of serotonin and dopamine, that when I came out of that state, I went right back in.
Mm-hmm.
But can I tell you what was happening? No. So when I watched that scene in the 2nd season where Rue is hallucinating that she is dancing with her father in the church, I was emotional.
Yeah.
Or as they say on TikTok, emotional damage.
Emotional damage. I don't know. Listen. I'm not gonna lie, and I'm not trying to glorify drugs in any which ways whatsoever, but my experience with drugs up until a certain point was great. I was very functional, and I was very able to do what I was doing, and I'd still at the same time, handle my responsibilities. But eventually that all, came to a head and things fell apart. And, and I eventually had to get my life together and straighten myself out, because nothing lasts forever. And when you're doing that to yourself, at some point, it's going to do more damage than it does good. Mm-hmm. And I was realizing that, and I knew that I had to change, and I was able to change my life around. But, Rue, she's a perfect example on how she's a runaway train with no brakes. And what that's like, and what that character is like, and what that type of person does to themselves and the people around them.
Yeah, well, I can tell you firsthand, it is horrific.
Mm-hmm.
I told you, and I've said this, I think, on the show many times. Euphoria was the first time that I saw my story being told, which was the story of a victim, of a drug addict. And Rue's sister, Gia, she's the one that finds Rue overdosed.
Yeah, her sister's the victim. Her mother's a victim.
And that's why when D.A.R.E says that it's glorifying it, I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? The level of agony that I watch in this show is almost gut wrenching to me.
Yeah.
And I say almost, but I'm gonna take that back a step. It is 100% gut wrenching for me, because the first season tore me apart, because I watched things happen on that show that happened in my life that I've never seen anywhere else. I felt like there was no level of glamorizing in it. It actually felt so raw to me, and I connected so hard with it. But then I have to think about the people that have never experienced an inkling of that. Yeah. How they could look at that and be like, what the fuck is this? This is too much.
Yeah, like, and again, and I can see why, from that perspective, it seems like it's being glorified. Yeah. Like, what are we doing here? Like, somebody who can't connect or relate to what it is that the show is displaying is going to be left with the questions like, why why is this show even about this? Like, why spend so much money making a show about a drug addict and someone that does drugs and things of that nature? It's the same thing of like, many people probably ask, why did they make Brokeback Mountain?
That's interesting.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
but I'm sure there's a whole culture of people that know exactly
what that's like.
Yeah. And it was probably, and all the people that are connected with people like that, it was, those people, they need that.
Same thing with Dallas Buyers Club.
Yeah.
Like, I remember watching that, and I was just, my mind was blown watching that.
Absolutely.
I will tell you this, though. I'm trying to think of how I want to deliver this. In watching the show, think about all the things that I see displayed on the show. And as much as it connects to my life, this last episode, there was a scene in the show where I was unable to watch it because that's how hard it hit. It hit
I remember
home.
that scene.
I don't want to say what was happening in the scene, because there are maybe some viewers or some listeners that haven't watched the episode yet. So I don't want to spoil it for anybody. And I also don't want to scare anybody. But the reason why the scene was scary for me to watch is because I have seen that action happen.
But I mean, why not talk about it? So we watch so many other content creators talk about details of shows and episodes, and they announce it. They say, hey, spoiler alert.
Okay.
If you haven't watched it,
spoiler alert.
Listen, if you haven't watched the last episode of Euphoria, spoiler alert. Yes. It's coming up.
Thank you.
Just tune away. This is probably not something that you want to hear. We're going to relieve some details. We're going to reveal some details about the episode. Yeah. And if you're going to watch it, you're not going to want to listen to this.
Yeah.
So in the episode, please tell us.
And in last Sunday's episode, there's a scene where Rue's being injected with morphine. I have the hardest time watching anything be injected. It was more than being injected with morphine. She showed up to a drug dealer's house, yes. Right? That she took a bunch of drugs on credit off of this drug dealer, and she did it with the intent not to sell it. She was going to use it and do it all, but she somehow tricked the drug dealer to giving her a bunch of drugs on credit because she had this master plan on how she was going to sell it and make the drug dealer a bunch of money, and the drug dealer bought the plan, fronted her a bunch of drugs. She fucked up the whole deal, ends up getting the drugs confiscated from her mom because Jules rats her out. I don't think her mom confiscated them. If I remember correctly, Jules actually says that she flushed them down the toilet.
So Jules flushed them down the toilet. Yeah. Whatever the case may be, at this point she's like full blown like in addict mode. She's doing all types of drugs, and at that point she has an endless supply. Mm-hmm. She goes home to try to re-up and do some more drugs because she needs to, because like she's at the point where like she's down and finds that her drugs are gone. Has a big fiasco at her house. Now she's going through withdrawals. She's getting sick. She's doing all this shit to try to like get drugs so that she can get a fix, what they call it, mm-hmm. fix the sickness, so she doesn't continue to go through withdrawals. And then by some chaotic events where she's like robbing, she enters she does a B&E where she like enters a house, robs them, gets all this stuff, shows up at the drug dealer's house sick. The drug dealer realizes what's going on, mm-hmm. shows a side of sympathy for her. Mm-hmm.
But I would say it's a side of sympathy that comes from it's like a psychotic,
yes.
This lady who's the drug dealer she's not all there.
Yeah, she's not all there, but she also is still sympathetic because she knows she used to be a drug addict. Correct. And she knows what Rue is going through, mm-hmm. but she knows that Rue has never injected heroin or morphine, mm-hmm. because she has some medical grade morphine, and tells Rue, I don't have pills. All I have is liquid morphine injectables, and you don't do that. So she lets Rue go through her withdrawals, and Rue is to the point where she can't take it no more. She knows that this lady has it, and she asks her for it. And at that moment, that lady sets her up with the kit, with the tourniquet kit.
Well, when I tell you that when that scene started to unfold, I literally left the room.
Yeah.
I left the room and I said, Just tell me when it's over. I firsthand can tell you, I have seen drugs injected. I have been in crack houses. I have been in drug houses. And when I tell you, it was too much for me to watch. So when D.A.R.E says that they're glorifying, let me say this again. When D.A.R.E says that they are glorifying drug use, what the fuck are you talking about? Because when I tell you that was in direct line with experiences in my life of watching people do drugs.
So here's
I'm so confused by what D.A.R.E means by that.
Here's the beautiful thing about that episode, right? And I say beautiful because I say it was so eye-opening and so educational, right? Mm-hmm. And most people won't see it that way, but I'm gonna tell you why I see it that way. Is because it clearly shows how someone who doesn't inject heroin may end up injecting heroin and not by choice. But now Rue has the experience. She's experienced what it's like to get it intravenously. And it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out now.
Correct.
Is she going to prefer that from now on? Is she going to seek that out from now on? Is she going to follow the path of a lot of heroin users who that's the only way that they prefer it?
Yeah.
It's so it's one of those things where, again, they pull back the curtain on how something like that can play out. Give people an understanding. How, because I think so many people actually question that. How does somebody come to that point where they stick a needle in their arm for drugs? You know, like so many people go to the doctor and they get an injection and they're just like, you know, that's the last thing they want to do.
Yeah.
How does somebody willingly just put a needle in their arm, you know? That scene tells you how something like that happens and how moving forward somebody does it voluntarily. And I think it's amazing.
And to wrap this up, because I so fucking agree with you so hard on that. And this is why I will say it again. I feel like the show is going to give people that lack the understanding of drug addiction. I hope it gives you some empathy as to how some people can end up this road. I will say that Sam Levinson, who is the director of Euphoria, if you watch the kind of like the after, I don't know what they really call it, like the after of Euphoria, where like they interview him and he kind of gives like a little background as to his direction of the show.
Mm-hmm.
There was a scene where Cal was driving and he was listening to Depeche Mode, and I looked at you and I go, this story is written from this man in a way where I know he's directing it and the writer and him are friends also. I personally feel like Sam has direct experience with this because it is just so on point for me.
So on point. Somebody has experience. Somebody knows what the fuck they're doing over there.
Because there's no way that you've never experienced drug use, drug addiction, exposure, like how it's being administered. All of those aspects, there is no fucking way that you are able to deliver it in that way if you have not experienced it.
Well, so here's the thing, right? I do agree with what you're saying, but there are also those people who are able to reenact things just by seeing it. Or just by getting it from someone else. You know what I mean? I feel, because like to think that, I mean, Zendaya is
no,
like,
that's not what I'm saying. I feel you on that.
Okay. So am
I'm
I missing the mark?
I'm talking about the creators of the show.
Okay.
There's no way that you're just writing that down on a piece of paper and you're imagining that that's the way that it goes down.
Or maybe they've seen it go down.
But that means that they would have experienced it somehow.
Okay. Yeah.
Because
all right. I hear what you're saying.
I myself have never injected drugs, but have I seen it? Yes. And can I tell you how it looks? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But it comes from experience. I'm telling you, Evo, there is no way to the T of the way that even Rue reacts when the drug is administered into her. That is from direction.
Yeah.
So whether they have seen it, experienced it, there's no glamorizing in that shit. There's no glorification in that shit. So D.A.R.E, I'm sorry. I feel like you're way off the fucking mark. And maybe you need to seek out, maybe you should have a conversation with the creators of Euphoria to get a better understanding of what it is that they're trying to deliver. Because back in the day when Nancy Reagan said just say no, she didn't know what the fuck she was talking about either, because people were treating drug addiction like it was, they're not treating it like the way that it is now, like it's an epidemic, versus back then it was like the war on drugs, we must fucking eradicate this shit. It's very different now. So the understanding back then to what it is now, I still feel like there's a separation somewhat. And I feel like maybe they should talk to the people from Euphoria. Maybe they'll gain a better understanding of actually what is happening to young people and the way that they're consuming these drugs.
I think Euphoria is the new D.A.R.E, right? And hear me out for a second,
okay,
right?
I'm going to hear you out.
Right? Is because they dare to tell the truth.
And nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Nothing but the truth. And it takes balls to come out and exploit shit like that, to pull back the curtain.
Well, technically, it takes balls and ovaries.
Yes,
because
it takes balls and ovaries. Thank you very much. Yes.
Zendaya is delivering that shit on a silver platter.
I stand corrected. But yes, it is not easy to put yourself out there the way that this show has. And
I love you, and I want to, we're gonna end it with that. But when you said it's not easy, I really thought it's not easy being cheesy.
Oh, damn it, Gina.
Listen. It's Friday. We're having a good time. We're enjoying our drinks. I just want to thank everybody for joining us again.
Always a pleasure.
Yes, for sure. So whether you're listening, whether you're watching, however you're choosing to consume our content, we appreciate you. So, and again, I'm just going to let you know, whatever button there is around you, whether it's a follow, whether it's a subscribe, whether it's a donate. Please
look for it.
Look for that shit, because that helps us
grow. Press it, click it, support.
Yeah.
Tell a friend. Yeah. And if you think that we have the potential to be something that is beyond what you see here, share us.
Yeah, for real.
Support it.
For real.
Tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend.
Yeah, for real. But with that being said, until next Friday, everybody. Peace out.